Let me ask you something. What would you do if a foreign official walked into your country, stood before your leaders, and calmly announced that your freedom to choose your own friends is officially over? And what if that official represented the most powerful empire on earth, holding the weight of global finance in one hand and the threat of total economic collapse in the other? This is not a hypothetical scenario from a bygone colonial era. This is the exact brutal reality facing the global south today. Behind the polished smiles of diplomacy, a cold and calculated war is being waged. It is a war of ultimatums. It is a system where distant capitals decide exactly how the wealth of your land should be divided and who gets to sit at the trading table. The bare truth is this. The old empires never truly left. They simply traded their military uniforms for tailored suits, replacing physical occupation with the suffocating grip of financial dependency and veiled threats. Stay with us. This is more than a headline. It is a hinge in history. If this story resonates, show your support with a like, a comment, or a subscription. It means more than numbers. It keeps the story alive. When an ultimatum is delivered, who exactly pays the price? It is never the foreign diplomats boarding their private jets, flying safely above the consequences of their demands. It is the people whose calloused hands work the deep red soil. It is the farmers, the factory workers, and the youth who are systematically stripped of the right to determine their own destiny on their own ancestral land. They are the ones who watch the rich harvest of their nation, the vital minerals, the gold, the energy resources, shipped away to power foreign cities, while they are left with the hollow conditional promises of international aid. For decades, the unwritten rule of the global order was simple: comply or face the consequences. If a developing nation dared to question the terms of an exploitative trade agreement, or if it attempted to forge new, independent alliances with emerging global powers, the punishment was swift and devastating. Vital development funds would mysteriously dry up. In extreme cases, preferred trade agreements, like those allowing tariff-free access to Western markets, would be violently weaponized, threatening to push already fragile economies into catastrophic levels of unemployment. The message sent to the developing world was unmistakable. Your sovereignty is only valid as long as it serves our strategic interests. The narrative pushed by international media always frames these interventions as necessary steps to maintain a rules-based order. But whose rules are they? Imagine a scenario where a foreign power demands that you completely rewrite your own domestic laws, specifically targeting land reforms designed to correct centuries of colonial land theft. They frame it as a sudden, passionate concern for property rights, conveniently ignoring the historical reality that the vast majority of the land was taken by force from the indigenous population. They demand that you publicly condemn your own historical protest songs, dismissing your highest constitutional court when those courts explain the deep, symbolic context of those chants. The ambassador from a nation that refuses to even recognize the International Criminal Court has the audacity to stand on your sovereign soil and tell you that your justice system is fundamentally wrong. You simply cannot make this up. This is the staggering level of entitlement we are witnessing on the world stage. They demand absolute loyalty to a system that routinely ignores the voices of the vulnerable. If a sovereign African state attempts to use the actual agreed-upon international legal system to challenge a powerful global player, the immediate response from the West is not a respectful legal defense. The response is a barrage of economic threats, fierce diplomatic pressure, and aggressive lobbying campaigns aimed at punishing the smaller nation for daring to speak out of turn. When the law is used by the global south to demand accountability, it is suddenly treated as an act of diplomatic hostility. Let that sink in for a moment. When a country uses the law, the very system the world was told to respect, and the empire responds with threats to their export markets, what does that say about the system itself? Keep that question in mind. because it is the master key to decoding the current global crisis. The empire demands that you abandon your deepening ties with emerging economic blocs. They demand you cancel joint military exercises with nations they disapprove of. They demand you pick a lane, and that lane must always, without exception, lead back to their doorstep, reinforcing their wealth and your dependency. But history is rarely a straight line. Just when the architects of this unequal system believed their control was absolute, the earth began to shift beneath their feet. The global elite, sitting comfortably in their air-conditioned offices across Washington, London, and Paris, calculated that the immense pressure would force every African nation to permanently surrender. They assumed that the sheer terror of economic isolation would be more than enough to keep the continent in line, ensuring the resources kept flowing outward. They were fundamentally wrong. From the very heart of the Sahel, a profound and undeniable defiance has emerged, challenging the core assumptions of Western hegemony. A new generation of leadership is looking at the old ultimatums and simply refusing to bow. They are looking at the heavily guarded doors of the global financial system and deciding to build their own road instead, one paved with self-reliance rather than debt. They realize that a partnership built on the constant threat of starvation is not a partnership at all. It is a hostage situation, and hostages eventually find a way to break their chains and walk towards the light. This monumental clash is no longer confined to hushed conversations in diplomatic backrooms. It has spilled out into the open, fundamentally challenging everything we know about global power dynamics in the 21st century. This is not just a passing diplomatic disagreement that will blow over in a week. It is a fight for survival. It is a fight for the very soul and soil of the continent, a battle to ensure that the wealth of the land serves the people who live on it. When the diplomatic smiles fade and the polite ultimatums are firmly rejected, the empire reveals its most destructive weapon. It is not always a drone strike or a physical military invasion. In the modern era, the most effective tool of subjugation is the silent, suffocating weaponization of the global economy. This is the layered reality of international relations that mainstream analysts desperately try to obscure. Let us break down exactly how this economic warfare operates on the ground. When a developing nation signs a major trade pact, they are loudly told it is a bridge to the global market, a generous gift of opportunity. Entire industries are subsequently built around these exports. Automotive plants, massive agricultural hubs, and deep mining operations are entirely structured to feed Western demand under agreements like the African Growth and Opportunity Act. But the very moment that sovereign nation exercises its legal right to take a powerful ally of the West to the International Court of Justice, the tone instantly changes. The bridge miraculously becomes a barricade. Foreign investors are quietly warned by their home governments to pull their capital. Visa restrictions are suddenly and arbitrarily imposed on diplomats. The very foundations of the local economy are deliberately shaken to remind the nation who truly holds the leash. The hypocrisy is absolutely breathtaking. The same foreign capitals that proudly lecture the developing world about the sanctity of free markets and the absolute necessity of the rule of law are the first to abandon those principles when the law is actually used against them. They demand that African states respect the international legal system, yet they aggressively lobby behind closed doors to economically punish anyone who uses that exact system to seek justice. This is not a rules-based order. It is a meticulously managed hierarchy of power. To the citizens of the global south, this framework looks exactly like the brutal colonial systems of the past, merely updated with modern financial instruments and corporate treaties. It is a system that happily extracts the vast wealth of the soil, but violently rejects any attempt by the rightful owners of that soil to govern themselves. The human cost of this geopolitical chess match is devastating. We are not talking about abstract economic theories debated in university halls. We are talking about the daily survival of millions. When a country with a staggering unemployment rate sitting above 32% is threatened with the sudden, catastrophic loss of its primary export markets, the leverage is immediate and brutal. The political elite sitting comfortably in Washington or London do not feel the agonizing pain of these sanctions. The crushing burden falls entirely on the shoulders of the working class. It falls on the men and women with calloused hands who wake up long before the sun to work the factories, tend the land, and gather the harvest. By threatening to collapse these vital industries, the empire effectively holds the livelihoods of ordinary citizens hostage, weaponizing the threat of mass poverty to force sovereign leaders to abandon their independent foreign policies. This calculated cruelty is explicitly designed to serve as a public execution of sovereignty. By publicly and severely punishing one defiant nation, the empire sends a chilling, undeniable message to every other government watching carefully from across the continent. Every leader is running the exact same calculation in their minds. The unwritten rules are broadcast loudly. Do not dare to deepen your economic ties with emerging Eastern powers. Do not seek alternative financial systems or trade in different currencies that bypass Western control. Do not ever use international courts to challenge the actions of the powerful, no matter how justified your case may be. If you step out of line, if you choose genuine non-alignment, the penalty will be the systematic destruction of your economy. For a long time, this strategy worked flawlessly. Faced with the terrifying prospect of economic annihilation, most nations quietly folded. They chose basic survival over genuine sovereignty, accepting the heavy, invisible chains of conditional aid and restricted trade. They accepted that their role in the world was simply to provide raw materials while taking orders from abroad. But the landscape of global power is finally fracturing. A profound and unyielding resistance is taking root in the dry earth, refusing to be intimidated by the old threats. Let us take a moment here, not to rush forward, but to give thanks. Write a comment with a simple thank you to Traore, to Burkina Faso, or to the spirit of sovereignty itself. Gratitude is not a formality, it is recognition, it is dignity expressed in words. When you add your voice of thanks, you are not just engaging with a video, you are standing in solidarity with a story of freedom and pride. So, before we continue, take this pause to comment your thank you. Together, those words become a beacon that shines far beyond the screen. Faced with a massive economic machine explicitly designed to crush any form of dissent, a fierce new force has emerged in the very heart of the Sahel. They have looked directly at the empire's ultimate weapon and made a choice that is currently sending shockwaves through the heavily guarded corridors of Western power. While the global elite sat comfortably in their air-conditioned offices, certain they had engineered a world where no African nation could breathe without their permission, they missed the moment the earth began to rumble beneath them. They were so busy monitoring bank accounts and threatening export markets that they failed to see the emergence of a new, unyielding fortress in the Sahel. This is where the old playbook of intimidation finally hit a wall of solid stone. In the very heart of this resistance, Burkina Faso has become the epicenter of a monumental shift that is currently shattering every assumption of Western dominance. Guided by the steadfast and unyielding vision of Ibrahim Traore, this nation has done the unthinkable. They have looked at the empire's ultimatums and simply thrown them back. Before we reveal the next chapter, which is perhaps the most powerful assertion of sovereignty you will ever hear, I want to pause and speak directly to you. If this channel has moved you, if these stories are touching something deep in your spirit, then consider becoming a member. Not for exclusive content or perks, but because supporting this channel is directly supporting narratives that mainstream media refuses to tell. Every membership is a vote for Sankara's Echo's mission. Every member becomes a co-creator of the revolution we are documenting. Join us. Stand with the principle that African wealth belongs to Africa. The defiance of Ibrahim Traore is not just about political rhetoric. It is a fundamental rejection of the dependency model that has impoverished the continent for generations. While other nations are being lectured and threatened by foreign ambassadors, Burkina Faso is quietly and methodically dismantling the machinery of neocolonialism. They have realized that the rules-based order was never meant to protect them, it was meant to contain them. Under Traore's leadership, the nation has stopped asking for permission to secure its own borders or trade its own resources. They are no longer waiting for foreign saviors who only arrive with heavy conditions and hidden agendas. Instead, they are empowering the calloused hands of their own people to defend the soil and reclaim the harvest that has been stolen for far too long. This is the nightmare scenario for the old empires. They are not just afraid of one man or one country, they are terrified of a template. If Burkina Faso can successfully navigate the storm of Western pressure, if they can build a functioning, secure state while ignoring the threats of economic retaliation, the secret is out. It proves to every other African government that multi-aligned diplomacy is not just a dream, it is economically viable. It proves that you can trade with the East, stand for justice in international courts, and still maintain your dignity without being crushed. The empire is desperate to extinguish this light because they know that sovereignty is the most contagious idea in human history. The strategy used against Traore is a sophisticated blend of diplomatic isolation and manufactured crises. They try to portray this movement as a chaotic break from stability, yet they ignore the fact that the stability they offered was nothing more than a slow-motion theft of national wealth. They want the world to believe that without their guidance, the Sahel will fall into darkness, but the reality is the opposite. For the first time in decades, the people of the region are seeing a road that was built by their own labor, led by a leader who speaks their language and shares their struggle. This is the true revolution, a shift from being a spectator in your own country's history to becoming the primary architect of its future. But let us be clear, the empire does not retreat quietly. When they see that their financial threats are not working, when they see that the people are beginning to stand behind a leader who refuses to be bought, they pivot to much more insidious tactics. They begin to use the very institutions of justice they claim to uphold as weapons of sabotage. They try to engineer internal divisions, hoping that the seeds of doubt will grow faster than the seeds of self-reliance. They are betting that the weight of the global system will eventually be too much for a single, determined nation to bear. The empire, when faced with a spirit it cannot break through financial strangulation, resorts to its most insidious tactic, the systematic hollowing out of a nation's soul from within. This is where the struggle of Ibrahim Traore transcends simple politics and enters the realm of a generational battle for the mind. The global machine does not just want your gold or your oil, it wants to convince you that you are fundamentally incapable of managing them yourself. They want to ensure that the next generation of leadership in the global south remains intellectually colonized, forever seeking validation from the very capitals that profit from their dependency. This is the psychological price of sovereignty that the mainstream media refuses to discuss. To stand as Burkina Faso stands today is to invite a relentless barrage of information warfare. They will label your pursuit of independence as instability. They will call your refusal to be bullied isolationism. They will use every sophisticated tool in their media arsenal to sow seeds of doubt among your own people, hoping to turn the calloused hands of the worker against the very leaders fighting to protect their harvest. The empire knows that its physical grip is weakening, so it doubles down on the chains of the mind, attempting to manufacture a narrative where your only choices are submission or chaos. Now, let us turn this story into a shared moment. Take a second right here to tell us where you are watching from. Type the name of your city, your land, the soil beneath your feet. And as you do, know this. Sankara's echo sends you not just thanks, but a blessing. For strength in your hands, for pride in your heart, for light on the road ahead. The comments below become a map of connection, showing that this message reaches far beyond borders. But the machine is facing a structural flaw it did not anticipate. In the 21st century, the monopoly on truth has been shattered. The youth of the continent are no longer looking to the old world for their identity. They are looking at the dry red earth of the Sahel and seeing a template for a future that does not involve begging. They see a leader who does not spend his time in luxury hotels in Switzerland, but one who stays on the soil, breathing the same air as the people he serves. This is the real reason the empire is running out of patience. It is not because of a protest song or a land reform act. It is because the spell of inferiority has been broken. The cost of this defiance is real. It manifests in targeted financial pressure, in visa restrictions that separate families, and in the sudden withdrawal of security assistance that was always designed to keep the host nation dependent. The empire gambles that the immediate economic pain will trigger a domestic backlash, forcing the sovereign leader to capitulate or face a coup orchestrated from abroad. They have used this playbook dozens of times, from South America to Southeast Asia, but in Burkina Faso, the calculation is different. When you have already lived through decades of a stability that only produced poverty and stolen resources, the threat of economic pressure loses its teeth. What is there to lose when you are fighting to reclaim everything? We must ask ourselves, what does it say about the global system when the most powerful nations on earth feel threatened by a small African democracy using legal courts and exercising its right to trade? If the system is so fragile that one country's pursuit of genuine non-alignment can bring it to the brink of retaliation, then the system was never built on justice. It was built on a fragile, enforced monopoly. The empire is doubling down on its demands because it knows that the road to a multipolar world is being paved right now, and every brick in that road is a nation that has decided it is no longer afraid. This is the billion-dollar question that haunts the architects of the old world. Can they survive a world where they are no longer the only ones who get to decide what justice looks like? As the pressure intensifies and the global blocs demand absolute loyalty, the people of the Sahel are proving that there is a third way. It is a road lit by the flame of dignity, and while it is the hardest road to walk, it is the only one that leads to a real future. But as we move toward the final confrontation, we must prepare for the empire's last, most desperate act of sabotage, the attempt to turn the entire continent into a battlefield to save its own fading influence. The empire has finally made its choice, and in doing so, it has stripped away the last remnants of its democratic mask. When a superpower publicly declares that it is running out of patience with a sovereign nation for the crime of using international law and choosing its own allies, it is no longer speaking the language of diplomacy. It is speaking the language of a desperate monopoly. The threats to export markets, the weaponization of trade agreements like the African Growth and Opportunity Act, and the arrogant dismissal of foreign courts are all symptoms of a system that knows its time is running out. They have turned the quest for justice into a liability and the pursuit of independence into a threat. But as the dust settles on these latest ultimatums, a profound and heavy silence has fallen over the old world, while a vibrant, unstoppable chorus is rising from the global south. We are witnessing the birth of a world where multi-aligned diplomacy is no longer a radical dream, but a lived reality. The attempts to isolate those who stand for their own soil are failing because the earth itself is tired of the old chains. The indignation we feel today is not just about a single trade deal or a diplomatic row. It is a righteous anger against a system that expects us to be the grass that suffers whenever the elephants decide to fight. We are no longer content to be the backdrop for someone else's geopolitical chess match. The regret that haunts the halls of the old empires is the realization that they can no longer buy the silence of the continent. They spent decades building a world of dependency, certain that the threat of poverty would always be enough to ensure submission. But they forgot that the most powerful force on earth is a human being who has rediscovered their own dignity. Every threat issued from Washington, every sanction whispered in Brussels, and every arrogant lecture delivered by an ambassador only serves to strengthen the resolve of those who have decided to walk the road of self-reliance. The seeds of defiance that were planted in the shadows of the 20th century are finally breaking through the hard earth, reaching for a light that no foreign power can extinguish. What you have witnessed today is not a conclusion, but an opening. Africa's story of pride and independence is still being written, and each voice that joins makes the chorus stronger. Subscribe now, not as a favor, but as a commitment to follow this journey. Because the next video will not just continue the story, it may reshape how you see the world. Do not let this moment pass into silence. subscribe, and stand ready for the chapter that comes after this one. The road ahead is difficult, but the light of sovereignty is now too bright to be extinguished by media manipulation or manufactured terror. Every time a pseudo-diplomat attempts to sell the harvest of the nation for personal gain, the people must remember the example of those who chose the road of dignity. The struggle for West Africa is the heart of the world, a fight to ensure that the wealth of the land serves the people of the land. We have seen the lies, we have calculated the distances, and we have identified the mercenaries. The machine is exposed, and its power is fading because the people have decided to become ungovernable by anything other than their own truth. The era of manufactured dependency is reaching its inevitable end, giving way to a new dawn where the soil and the soul are finally reunited. In this monumental shift, the unwavering vision and leadership of Ibrahim Traore serve as a powerful reminder that an African nation can indeed forge its own path without external permission. The success of Burkina Faso in reclaiming its territory and its dignity has provided a blueprint for the entire continent to follow. As the old empires scramble to maintain their grip, they find that they can no longer suppress the spirit of Ibrahim Traore, which has ignited a flame of independence that will burn until every strategic resource is back in the hands of its rightful owners.